Hi, everybody.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to
Hello.
another episode of Detention. And we are here tonight with CBCG Coach and Output Speedlab owner and founder, Josh Sutton. Josh, welcome to Detention. What have you done?
Thank you for having me.
What have you done,
Um,
Josh?
What have I done? I don't know.
Josh Sutton was born in Germany, a fact that I apparently cannot keep in my brain, and moved to Oregon just before high school. He grew up playing baseball and hockey, and he shifted to a real focus on endurance sports after he got his MBA at the University of Oregon. Before that, he attended the University of Portland. Is really like all in on the Oregon thing, and graduated from there in 2003. Before working for 14 years as a structural engineer, the bulk of those at a company called Acumed, just outside of Portland. He traded all of that in for the endurance world in 2017 when he began working for us as coach and also founded Output Speedlab, which is a premier bike fitting studio here in Portland, which all of you can see right behind Josh's shoulders. Josh is a three-time Ironman, a sub 3 hour marathoner at the Portland Marathon last year, and has gone 4:36 in a 70.3, very often running in the mid 120s for his 70.3 half marathons. Super strong athlete, great bike fitter, great coach. Josh, thank you so much and welcome to Detention.
Right on. That's an awesome intro. Thank you.
So, Josh, is this your first time in detention? Not on the show, but in real life. Were you someone who ended up in detention as a middle schooler or a high schooler? We know you as it's a pretty clean cut guy, but tell us what we're missing about your history and your origin story.
Yeah, I wasn't in detention too often.
Hmm.
I think the only time I was ever in detention was during college. We went up to the roof of one of the engineering buildings and we were bored and got caught up there and yeah, I got in big trouble.
What were
It
you
was my senior
doing? Were you
year.
engineering?
Yeah, we're looking at the stars or something.
Ah,
But
boy.
I know pretty bad stuff. I know pretty.
All right. All
I didn't
right.
know
Yeah.
that the University of Portland was in the habit of putting undergraduates in detention.
It's a Jesuit school.
Got it. Now I understand. Okay.
Right.
Um, since we're on the subject of misbehaving, you knew that this was probably coming. Would you tell us, and would you tell all of our watchers, the story of how you were ejected from a hockey game back in high school?
Josh.
Oh man. I think I was ejected more than one time. Um,
So
yeah,
disappointed.
like I was kind of that, faster forward goal scorer, and the other teams, kind of the strategy of the good teams was to get under my skin, and uh, and that was kind of like making myself my own worst enemy. And so, during the games, I'd get past them. So I'd have defensemen, slashing me and pulling me down, or I'd be in front of the net and they'd, be knocking me over. And, at times you get frustrated, and they can usually hold it together. But then, the problem when you hold it together that long is that all of a sudden something blows.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would kind of have this like notorious every now and again, just like, explosion. So yeah, one time I think I got knocked over or something, and it was just like many times during the game, and I ended up like picking up the puck and throwing it like out of the stadium, and like towards the Zamboni or something, and because like I was mad, they didn't call a penalty, and I was getting hacked all game, and so basically I got thrown out, and the other team won because. I couldn't keep it together. But yeah, I think I got into a fight with a goalie once, and that didn't turn out well. But yeah, I wasn't much of the fighter, but they'd get me frustrated pretty easily.
My goal for the rest of this interview is to make Josh lose his cool.
I spent some time in a previous life as a goalkeeper in soccer, and so I know what happens when opposing forwards start messing with the goaltender. So, yeah, that probably did not end super duper well.
God.
Oh no, I had the whole team like running after me.
Oh God.
When you say you threw the puck towards the Zamboni, was it possible that perhaps like there was also like some spectators in that direction?
They were close, but didn't like hit any spectators. But it was out of the like out above. And there's always like a little tunnel where the Zamboni comes out of, and I think it like hit the Zamboni or something because like my coach owned the rink and owned the Zamboni and was none too pleased that I got kicked out and threw a puck at his Zamboni. So.
You can't just go out and get a Zamboni.
No. No. Yeah, where do you get Zamboni? Is there like a Zamboni dealership?
I think maybe. I need to know the answer to that question now.
It's got to be a real stable business because like who steals a Zamboni?
And they must have like a lifespan, right? Like you've got to replace your Zamboni every 10 to 15 years, depending on how violent your hockey players are.
Right.
I mean, yeah.
There's a Josh Sutton scale. So they're like, if you have like 3.4 Josh Suttons, you have to replace your Zamboni like every like 5 years.
Every 6 to 7 days, yeah.
Right.
Kirby just said in chat, Josh, that her next goal is also to make her next bike fit such a nightmare that Josh loses his cool.
She believes you're pretty close already.
They're too enjoyable.
So I can only hope a similarly like rough and tumble part of your history, you were at some point in the medical engineering field, correct? Is that right?
I was, yes.
So what do you feel like you brought from that part of your background into your life in endurance sports now? So how does that translate into coaching and into bike fitting? How does that show up in the Josh Sutton that we all know and love?
I think in all the areas. I mean, as an engineer, and especially working in medical device industry, I mean, everything was very, very well documented and controlled, and you can't just make changes, and so I think that's kind of the way that I approach both coaching is a very thorough kind of process oriented approach, and using data, using kind of science behind decisions, and then of course the same thing in bike fitting. I mean, there's a lot of like anatomical elements and working with humans and trying to make them more comfortable and faster, and so all of that kind of uses that same like scientific approach, so definitely kind of translates into my style as coach and bike fitter.
Very cool. You must have loved your experience with Insight then. So much data.
Yeah, totally.
So much data.
Sometimes, you're kind of trying to figure out things about athletes, and you have, very few data points, and you maybe have this FTP number, but, taking that beyond that and saying, how can I tailor, and structure workouts to the individual athlete, sometimes there seems to be a little bit left out there on the table. I just kind of started, using Insight and kind of learning about it with Chris and Molly, it gives a bunch of different insights into the athlete and different levers you can pull and push that makes that training more impactful versus just getting kind of the same training for everybody. And so it's been a pretty interesting kind of insight into Insight.
Yay!
If you can think of like an example where you've kind of applied that like engineering mindset to an athlete? like if there's somebody that like leaps to mind, and obviously like, you know, you don't want to like throw their name out there, but yeah, like is there a situation where you've like applied that manner of thinking in the development of an athlete that you wouldn't mind like talking about?
Yeah, totally. So in engineering, I mean, a lot of times, you know, you're doing testing to like find, you know, kind of iterate and find failure points. And so, you know, a lot of times with an athlete, you don't know exactly what's going to work best for them and how they're going to respond to things. So kind of going through it in like an iterative approach, just like you would solving an engineering problem, where you test something, you see how it works, how they respond, and then from that, you know, okay, we need to change it a little bit, or we need to kind of keep doing what we're doing in order to, you know, because there's not just one, you know, process where you just follow steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that athlete is better. It's you do have a structure. But you usually have to test. You have to test how they, you know, how the specific type of training affects them. Do they get more fatigued with, you know, higher, you know, higher kind of power, you know, shorter intervals, or do they, you know, get more fatigued with, you know, longer sort of intervals? You know, what do they need to do to, you know, improve their performance? Same thing with their nutrition, you know, for training, and you know, that's a lot of times where you're just trialing and erroring and trying to see what kind of works with them. So being somewhat process oriented with that iterative approach is kind of, it's what I've seen success with athletes.
Very cool.
Hey, you brought up like testing a few times there, and I know that testing is something, you know, it's something that like all of us, like the four of us talk about a bunch. Like, what have you found like works for you in terms of like testing yourself? And then also what have you found has been like fruitful for testing with your athletes?
Yeah, I mean, doing testing or being able to get data from races that maybe simulate a test has been super helpful for me. I mean, when I kind of got into the sport, I instantly, you know, it just instantly clicked when it was like, oh wow, you know, training with power and training with paces and heart rate, where you could do a test, see what your current state baseline is, work through a training, you know, plan, whether that's, you know, a phase plan or not, and then retesting and seeing those results and you know, seeing those results kind of you know, translate to a race. So yeah, I mean, that was super duper easy for me when I kind of first got into training with power, was to you know, kind of see those benefits, and where I wanted to see those numbers. I didn't want to do it and just be like, oh, I think I do this today, I think I do that tomorrow. So that's kind of always been key for me, but as a coach, is to get those numbers and get those, you know, something that represents where the athlete is, and then kind of repeating that over some set amount of time. And, you know, sometimes that is shown in a race. You don't have to actually do that, you know, the grueling test by itself, you know, get the results in the race. But then seeing how the athlete changes and how they respond, and then making adjustments to their training from that.
So for a lot of us, those processes have been pretty difficult to stick to this year. 2020 has definitely not been a year where we like set out and execute on the plans that we have created for ourselves. How have you been? How have you adjusted your training in light of the pandemic, and in the shorter time frame in light of the wildfires here in the Northwest? How have you kept yourself accountable, and what's changed in that time for you?
Yeah, no, it's been a challenge for sure. And, you know, once races, or the you know, certainty of a race being canceled goes, you know, once that goes away, you're thinking, okay, well, what am I doing this for? You know, am I just doing this for racing? And you know, I've always enjoyed the lifestyle of training and seeing myself, feeling good, feeling fit, being able to do activities and do, different things. So that's kept me motivated. I definitely haven't been quite as structured without having, a specific, goal, race coming up. But, what I've kind of done in place of that is try to do more things that I maybe wouldn't do right in the middle of a race season. So, more gravel rides and mountain bike rides and more camping trips that involve both of those things. And so finding ways that kind of keep me moving, keep me doing something with, without a specific, specific goal and things that all of a sudden, we can't do things in big groups. And so, it's helped. It's helped to have a, professional triathlete girlfriend who's super motivated. So sometimes it's just following along with, being her training buddy. So to give her some credit for that and keeping me motivated. Just kind of solo training, I could easily see, training days just drop off, and so yeah. But I won't be all kind of roses about it. It's definitely been really tough, and definitely days where you're just like, oh man, why am I doing this, and what do I do next? And I don't know. So yeah, it's been fun as a coach, being creative with athletes and figuring out what sort of fun things, or just individual like goals that drive athletes and things that they want to do. So some athletes have been motivated by virtual races. Some athletes have been motivated by individual pursuits, and an athlete that their kind of weakness and the thing they wanted to work on was their run element of their racing and in a triathlon, but due to some injury stuff and due to the pandemic and everything, we were able to give them a kind of a set up a goal where we ran the Wildwood Trail. So awesome. It's something that he thought never even kind of came across in his mind that I'd do basically an ultra run, when he thought the running was kind of his kind of weakest spot, and so kind of made the best of it, and he's super duper stoked to do something that maybe even more so than finishing in 70.3. So yeah, it's been fun to kind of work with each athlete and find ways to kind of keep motivation.
What's the Josh Sutton goal during this time?
What is the goal? I mean, no, I didn't do any virtual races. Well, actually, I did do one virtual race last minute. Visited a friend in Ashland, and they had a virtual 13.3 mile run up Mount Ashland, and kind of last minute, but it was probably one of the funnest things I did all summer. And I thought, oh man, I'm just gonna be this is gonna be so tough. There's 5,600 feet of elevation, and the last half mile was like a scramble up basically boulders and things, and make your own path, and then you reach the top of Mount Ashland, and yeah, I think I wish I actually done more kind of events and things like that, and so yeah, that was probably the kind of the peak.
That's awesome.
Peak of fun events for this year.
I'm looking at that workout file right now. Yeah, that looks like a hard run.
Yeah, it was three something, a little over 3 hours or so, and
just under 3 hours in zone 2 heart rate.
250 something, and it felt better than I thought I was gonna feel, and it was generally hills for whatever reason haven't been, at least in my mind, haven't been my strength, but I was just kind of flying up it and was able to pace it well, and kind of stayed with Fiona, my girlfriend, and her friend Angela, and yeah, got to the got to the top. So yeah, felt good. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
So I know that the prospect, like coaching's like it's a funny like career, because like there isn't a real like concerted educational path to get here. I mean, I guess the people that like actually go to school for exercise physiology, but that's not any of the three of us. And I know that for myself, like I get super excited about like things that we discover along the way. I know that a lot of coaches are like that. What is something that you have gotten, like, that has been really helpful for you in your coaching, that you've learned kind of since you've involved yourself in endurance sports? So going all the way back to like 2010, when you like really got into this, like what's something that has been that's really changed your way of thinking around coaching and training for endurance sports?
Let's see. So just kind of like anything I learned as an athlete and how I applied it, or as a coach?
Anything, either any of those, like whatever is like kind of the thing that jumps out at you as like a central like pillar that you keep returning to in your coaching or your own training.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely find myself kind of applying things that I have learned, or things that I myself kind of think about when I'm racing. I've had to sometimes make sure I pull myself back from that, and because of what, maybe some of the motivations and some of the ways that I think about a race is a little bit different for every athlete. So kind of, making sure I'm listening to those individual athletes, but yeah, I mean, it always kind of comes back where I kind of like talk to athletes kind of about their racing plan, and the things that have served me well are, preparing in training. So basically doing things in training that when you get to the race, you've done them before. And both in pacing and in nutrition, and so that's something that I find a lot of athletes that have either trained by themselves, haven't had that guidance, or that maybe had coaches that didn't focus as much on that kind of preparing for the race, both in in the training, kind of all those elements. That's been one, I think that kind of like pacing during during the race is, especially pacing if someone can pace via either a power meter on the bike or heart rate or pacing on either the bike or the run. I find that it seems kind of second nature to me that it's kind of almost like a cheat during racing. And you see, I see athletes when they're racing next to me kind of be doing this yo-yo thing that I clearly are not pacing, for a long endurance event. And then almost 99% of the time, I eventually, will pass them because they can't sustain that kind of up and down mentality. So, because that seems like such a huge nugget of, and it maybe seems obvious to some, but obviously not a lot.
If I'm seeing that, enough people.
Right, if I'm seeing that as an athlete, and it just seems so such a kind of obvious thing. It's like this thing that is such a game changer in racing. So that's one thing that I worked on a lot with athletes, because I see it as such a beneficial thing
is kind of having that pacing. And, you know, for a half Ironman, for an Ironman, anything that's kind of longer where you're not just going by that instantaneous feel. Now, I do understand, you know, in you know, kind of the higher elite level racing, there is a little bit of a racing element to it where you got to stick with packs and you got to do different things. So that's kind of another territory. But for most you know, age group athletes and things, you know, it's all about racing themselves, and you know, and that's, you know, athletes can do that and have the best results.
Mm-hmm. So you've worked with a number of different athletes who have been of a variety of different capabilities and backgrounds and goals and aspirations and all of that. How do you get started? Like, how do you, if you have an athlete who signs up to work with you, where do you start with them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, the first thing is, you know, communicating and talking with the athlete and getting to know the athlete and getting to know their goals and getting to know, you know, what drives them. So, you know, some of that comes through an initial conversation and then their initial like intake kind of questionnaire, but, you know, learning as much about the athlete, you know, initially, and then kind of going over like what is to be expected, what do they have, you know, time for, and then really learn a lot about that athlete in that first month or so, in terms of how they respond to some, you know, different training, how do they respond to, you know, what works for them in terms of, you know, how much training and how much time they have, and their other life balances.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's, and I find, you know, that first bit of time, and it's different lengths for different athletes. It's kind of definitely like time and labor intensive, but then it sets it up really for kind of success going forward. You know, obviously once we kind of get established, and depending on where they're at in terms of their like, you know, their training and their physical, you know, capability, then we start, you know, looking at some of that baseline testing, where they're at, and especially if they haven't had anything like that, you know, initially. You know, the swim is almost all athletes can do that as long as they're not a beginner swimmer in terms of the testing load. So that's usually one we start with, and then the bike is kind of in that territory too. Usually, an athlete can, you know, get a, you know, FTD test of some sort, or kind of a basic kind of baseline, and then it's usually a little while later before we get more data on the run side of things, you know, depending on where they're at. But that's usually one that we want athletes to be in a pretty good position to be able to do a harder intensity, you know, run test. But yeah, you know, getting those metrics started, at least as a starting point, I like to get that, you know, established within the first 4 to 6 weeks, and then kind of go from there. So yeah, those are some of the keys.
Athletes, just like students, are endlessly surprising. What is something that has surprised you about coaching or a particular athlete? Again, you don't have to out them or anything like that, but like a moment of surprise for you in the process of coaching.
Oh man, I'm sure there's been tons of surprises. Let's see, what's some good surprises? I mean, there's been surprises in people's, you know, performances that were, you know, that you really kind of learn about those athletes, and you know, where you thought, hey, here's their capability, and then they showed you this next kind of level of mental, you know, toughness and capability. So there's positive, you know, surprises all the time working with athletes. You know, sometimes it's learning, you know, I mean, you kind of get to know athletes, you know, as a person. And so, but sometimes it's funny, you learn, you know, something like, oh, wow, I didn't know you had a dog that you have to, you know, take for a run every every day, a couple times a day, and that's why your runs look a little bit funny, and and like, oh yeah, the dog didn't want to run slow today, so and so you're like, oh, okay. This is would have been something good to talk about. But yeah, I guess the dog needs exercise, or else they'd be getting no sleep that night. So yeah, there's always kind of funny things that you find working with athletes.
Are you speaking from experience with the dog thing?
Yeah, that's been one kind of training difference. We got a puppy in January, a Australian Shepherd. That the idea, and it's come to fruition in some senses, was to have a running kind of buddy and a running dog, and yeah, he's doing pretty awesome on that front. But yeah, that's a whole new level of care of another little being, and yeah, and that's where I gain more respect. I don't have children, and so athletes that are training for Ironmans and things that have multiple kids and things, and that I just can't imagine having that much care for another human, and then trying to do the training on top of it. So but yeah, definitely the puppies are a lot of work as well.
That's amazing. But,
yeah.
Josh, I just want to let you know that in chat right now, you are part of the biggest hype train I think we have ever seen. We're getting tons of cheers and emojis, and it's the most exciting thing that's happening off screen right now. I need to know, though, are you collecting data about Leaf?
What about me?
Are you collecting data? Like, does he have a data-driven training plan?
Oh man, I know we were talking about that. Like with dogs, it's the same thing, right? If you want to go for a long run, you have to kind of slowly increment. So especially with a puppy, like you can't really run them until they get a little bit older. So he's like 10 months now. So we've kind of done his first few like trail runs, and we're like, okay, we can go like 30 minutes, and let's go. Okay, let's do like 40 minutes, and we're just running pretty easy, but. And then he just kind of wants to keep on going more, so you have to like hold him back at times and to keep going. And then same things, nutrition plans. He's got to have water. He's got to have treats. And like us all. Right?
Yeah, exactly. The treat plan is a very big important part.
Yeah, kind of why most of us are are doing this stuff. But yeah, no, he's been doing great, and yeah, I think we got him. He's done like over an hour run with us, and
oh man,
and like yeah, on the trails he just stays with us, and but like almost he focuses even more and like avoids other dogs and people and just stays with us. Like it's pretty awesome.
Oh, that's awesome, and always running partner. That's great.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's been tough. I mean, like everything but him, he's been cooped up too with all the smoke. We're not taking him out, and then he just goes insane. So we've been doing tricks and training inside, because mental training is almost as much important as physical, which is same thing for humans for endurance training. So, it's as much mental as anything.
I got totally distracted by all the amazing stuff that's happening in chat. This is awesome. Level 3 hype train, Josh. This never happens. Never happens.
We've had a level 3 hype train once before. This is incredible.
Yeah, this is great.
You're setting records.
But it sounds awesome.
It means that people are pumped to see you.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is how is working as a coach changed your view of what it's like to have a coach?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like learning a little bit of like what's going behind the scenes, and like the amount of work that somebody who's looking to kind of guide you on a macro level is doing in terms of like kind of thinking about about the athlete and applauding. And it's not just a, Training Peaks workout that shows up, and, and just kind of that time behind the scenes. And then how much you, as a coach, like when your athlete is racing or they have a hard workout, where you're like, you're almost as invested, as anything. And you're just like, you're excited to cheer them on, and you're like looking for updates, or they have this big, FTP test or whatever they're nervous about, and, checking in, like almost like, saying, oh man, it's not showing up on Training Peaks. Like, did they get it done? Like, what happened? And, and like, oh, I just didn't upload from my watch. And just how much you kind of like, behind the scenes, you're just kind of thinking about, those athletes and thinking about, their goals and their races and their workouts. And yeah. So yeah, that's been, I'd say it's like a surprise, but it's been like, it's just more like enlightening of kind of what being a coach, is, and and what goes on.
What's something that you would like to, if you had the ability, I know that we do not have the ability as coaches to change our athletes, but if you had the ability to change something that athletes do, or that you see athletes, a trap that you see athletes falling into, what would it be?
Probably being proactive in their workout planning. So, for a lot of athletes especially that have, 9-to-5 jobs that are pretty intensive, is getting good habits like workouts before work, is, once, it's like, well, I'll get to it after work, or I'll slide it in, between meetings and things, and inevitably the odds are things are gonna, go longer than you think. And so just kind of developing those habits that bring more consistency. And I think that's been the toughest thing for a lot of athletes is, they have certain goals, and then just getting that consistency, which is really the key to endurance training, is consistency of training. I mean, there's no one magic workout, but it's building workouts over time. So yeah, that's been the challenge with with everybody to some extent. We all have that problem sometimes of putting things back and trying to fit too many things in a day. But definitely had to work with athletes to set some sort of set goals and things for getting workouts done in the morning, or getting a specific type of workout that they're their least favorite, but maybe they're most beneficial, and figuring out ways to motivate. But yeah, it's or on the flip side, sometimes it is pulling people back, being like, we talked about that, doing that all out 50 sprints with your friends up every mountain, and you have that half Ironman in 4 weeks. And I know that ride was fun, and sometimes it is fun to do that, and we should do that. But if that's going to negatively impact their training, so sometimes it's pulling people back. But yeah, probably those two things.
Nice.
We just got a great question from chat from Jenny. So she says, circling back to your epic run up Ashland Mountain, that it sounded like it was kind of a last minute decision to do that. And she's wondering, she always feels mixed about how she handles that with coaches, because it's not on her schedule. So she asks, how can we as athletes best communicate with our coaches when things like that come up?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I've definitely had that as both an athlete and a coach. Communication is key. Right now, and I've kind of been pretty actively telling this to all my athletes that, like, hey, you guys have a lot more flexibility in terms of like doing things. Like, hey, be smart. But this is your time to be more flexible, and when you have opportunities come up, to take them. Most of the time, right, when we're training, I will talk to athletes about, as we get closer to, say, our given goal and our given race, then, the specificity is more important, to be kind of sticking to the plan and communicating when, we have problems meeting a specific workout or something we want to do. And then sometimes, you have someone be like, hey, I really have this ride, my friend's in town, I want to do this, do you think it's a good idea? And sometimes you have to find almost a little bit of a compromise to keep, keep people like happy and motivated. If this is all grueling and you can't ever do anything outside of the plan, but then also bring up, hey, you have this specific goal, where is that lie in importance, with doing, and sometimes, you gotta call the athlete out a little bit if they said a certain goal is really important and they're not following it, just saying, hey, what do you want from the training, and sometimes that just kind of like helps them walk through it and answers those questions for them, and and I think you being like, hey, I'm not gonna be mad or anything, like this is kind of your choices, and while I still want athletes to be like happy athletes, and if we can try to find that kind of fun middle ground that they're getting beneficial training, but and every athlete is a little different type of motivation, but yeah, that can be a challenge at times, and we all, I think, face that when we're hitting the grindstone and our friends are doing a fun group ride or whatever, and we have 3 by 30 minute intervals, and that's not conducive to riding with our friends. So fun and balance is key.
So I want to make sure that we talk a little bit about bike fitting too. We're running out of time, and there's so much to talk about there, especially with the beautiful Output Speedlab logo right in the background. I love it. It's so clean. So you opened Output in 2017, and it's been growing steadily ever since. Can you tell us a little bit about the business and how coaching and bike fitting fit together?
So Chris and I started Output 2017, and kind of started it off small. We were working at Pace on MLK, and then we were able, after about 6 months or so, we got our own studio, and that's where I'm sitting right now. It's kind of grown year over year. We do, bike fitting is kind of the primary service. And then we, slowly kind of expanded into doing some more service and custom bike building. And then also, we can sell bikes from a few brands. We're dealers for Argon 18 and Quintana Roo and their kind of sister lines of bikes, and can get parts from pretty much anybody, Wahoo, Garmin, SRAM, anything. That kind of complements. So we, it's a bit of a one-stop shop in the sense that if there's any changes that need to be done from the bike fit, can do all of those changes, install new handlebar, new power meter, etc. Without having to take the bike elsewhere. But still, everything that drives all of that is the bike fit itself, and kind of is the primary foundation of the business. Making athletes comfortable and fast, and those two things kind of go hand in hand. And just kind of how it integrates too with coaching. And we've had a number of CBCG athletes and other folks in, and a lot of CBCG coaches and others that have said, hey, like performance wise, we're gonna see benefits in your bike training if you're in a position that you can do your riding in, and you're comfortable riding in. And for a lot of athletes, work with are triathletes, and and so riding those long hours in a position that is both comfortable and aerodynamically fast is kind of what we're searching for. So yeah, I think that that mechanical engineering background just kind of blended right into starting this business, and then you're really talking and communicating with the bike fit client just like you're working with athletes as a coach, in the sense of like figuring out what what issues they have, what improvements they want to see. We ask every client in here what their goals are from a training, riding, racing standpoint, and that makes a big difference in like how we work with them and how we fit them, and how we set things up, whether it's more aggressive or not. And so yeah, definitely kind of works hand in hand with with coaching, and had folks that came in and then they become coach athletes, and coach athletes that have of course come to visit us, and we have a partnership with CBCG.
And then they can never leave.
Like circle, they're connected.
Part of the family.
What are some of the challenges that you encounter when you are fitting somebody, and could you give us some examples of like how you overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, our probably the number one issue on the bike is saddle discomfort. It's probably the number one complaint that's a significant complaint. So that's usually kind of one of the keys that we focus on. That's one of the key touch points of the bike. Your foot and pedal interface, saddle, and then your elbows in a tri bike and your hands on a road bike. But the saddle is really kind of the foundation. If we're not comfortable on the saddle, then we're not going to be comfortable elsewhere. And usually other problems stem from that. We're protecting on that saddle, so we sit funny on the saddle and our back starts hurting and our shoulders get tight, other things like that. So we always assess saddle comfort, and then also how the saddle promotes a position. You can be comfortable on the saddle, but if it's promoting a poor position, then it's not the right. They're not sitting on it properly, or it's not the right saddle. So yeah, we spend a lot of time with the saddle, making sure that it's positioned properly, saddle height, saddle tilt, and then if need be, we can test a whole number of saddles. And you can see here, I just turn the screen. We have
saddle wall.
some 30 plus demo saddles. So we do testing there. So that's definitely a focus point for a lot of folks. And yeah, there's kind of a number of other common issues that we see that we work towards. But that being kind of a good primary example.
As a totally unasked for shill, when I first moved out to Portland, I was coming from New York City, and I'd had one poor bike fit that resulted in a couple years of injury, followed by a great bike fit, and I was really scared to get mine redone. But when I got a new TT bike, it became really necessary. So I got my bike fit at Output, and it was awesome. It was by far the best bike fit I have ever had. So anybody who's debating it should go and get their bikes fit. It makes a huge difference in comfort, in preventing injury, and also in making sure that you're not terrified going down hills on your bicycle. What's the challenge there? Actually, I have another question before we get to that one. So I think one of the things that I've seen with folks as they start to get into to bike fitting and realizing how important it is for the sport, is that it's so dynamic. And I think that people expect one bike fit to last them for their entire lives, or for an entire bike. And I think that's been something that I've tried to talk people out of. What is something that you've noticed? If there's something that you wish that more athletes understood about bike fitting, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, both in the sense of, maybe someone who's had a fit years past, that things can change. But also people should get fits, earlier on their cycling journey. Usually it's something that people feel is only for, the elite racer and cyclist, and really, and then they wait 4 or 5 years into their, riding, racing, suffering through discomforts, kind of just feeling like, oh, it's a bike, it should be uncomfortable. That's what it is. And then oftentimes someone will come in and fit and just be like, oh my gosh, why didn't I get this when I first started? And it's tough, when it's like, hey, I just got this bike from a friend and I don't want to spend, money getting fit. But yeah, as soon as you start kind of getting serious about riding on a regular basis, the bike fit is, you can call me biased, but I also sell parts too, is the single most, cost versus performance gain that you can do. So, I'd love to sell you a, aerodynamic carbon fiber part, as well. But the bike fit is going to have more performance benefits than any part or even upgrade in the bike in terms of the difference in, one group set to another when you're looking at, whether to spend a $1,500 bike or a $2,000 bike. If the difference is that, get the $1,500 bike and a bike fit, and you're going to come out ahead compared to the $2,000 bike. So that's kind of the biggest thing. And then people who get fit, they're usually telling their friends like, oh, it's the best thing. Go do it. Like, don't hold back. I held back for years. And so that's what we kind of try to get out there, is that the benefits, even for a beginner, and really even more so for a beginner, if you're developing bad habits and potential injuries from a poor position, and if it just detracts you from not wanting to ride, then it can get you comfortable and set up, and then if you've been fit, as Molly mentioned, bodies change, bikes change, people travel, bikes, seats are in a new position because it's moved around. Got a new bike and try to set it up like it was maybe feeling in the past. So getting it reassessed on a regular basis, whether that's, you kind of throw out, on a yearly basis, but definitely if it's been a couple of years, to get it reassessed. Oftentimes, someone might be fairly comfortable, but we can find more comfort and or like more performance, especially in aerodynamics. We can keep your same comfort level and make you more aerodynamic and faster. Then that's another reason to kind of reassess the position on a regular season by season basis.
For sure.
Those of you out there in chat, we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. So if you've got a question for Josh, this is your chance to get it in here. But Josh, I was wondering if you would talk about kind of your process, like once you have somebody like on the fit bike, like what steps do you go through and what are you looking for?
Yeah, so after we kind of get, kind of go through our interview process and go through our mobility assessment and get people on our kind of dynamic fit bike, which...
Ooh, fancy.
And so we do all of our fits on that bike, which allows us to do movements, moving the handlebars and the saddle and everything up and down and in and out dynamically while you're riding. And we can do those changes back and forth instantly. So the process is, we usually start with assessing our saddle height and working out, any issues with the saddle to try to get that foundation, kind of part set. And then, also kind of look at, and a little bit prior to that, we'll make sure cleat interface and knee tracking is appropriately set up. And then we kind of adjust relative to that. We adjust the front end. So usually with that, we'll be moving things in and out and up and down, kind of in an iterative approach to find most comfortable aerodynamic
position in that saddle, kind of where that saddle is positioned, so relative to that. And then we call that kind of a position, say position 1. And then we'll iterate the saddle usually forward and back. In a time trial fits, usually we'll start backwards and move forward to try to get you more forward, more lower, and find kind of the most optimal weight distributions, so that we're not too much weight on our hands and not sitting too far back and upright like we're riding a beach cruiser. So we'll iterate, and we call these multiple positions. We'll move position of, say, your saddle forward, and then we'll reassess the front end and find where is it most comfortable with that saddle position. And then we call that, say, position 2. And we do position 3, position 4, and then we compare entire positions, position 2 relative to position 3, and find which of those positions of the multiple iterations we did is the optimal position. And then that's how we kind of come up with, usually our process, to come up with a optimal position. And we can do that for a new bike purchase a lot of times before we know what bike we're going to buy, and that gives us the best shot to pick the appropriate size bike and brand that fits us best. And then we kind of take that those coordinates, and if you brought in your bike, we put down your bike and set it up just like you were on our fit bike.
These are we've got 1 or 2 slightly strawman questions left over in the chat. How long should people expect a bike fit to go on for?
A bike fit, a full dynamic bike fit is 3 hours. So oftentimes people are kind of like, wow, that's a long time to be there. But kind of going through that entire process, including a mobility assessment, and then actually, the time zone this takes a while is actually wrenching on the bike itself as we try to make those adjustments to match. So that's installing a new stem, and our goal is to have the bike set up so you can roll out of here with the bike in the position. So sometimes it's 10-15 minutes on a rusted bolt, and if there's anything beyond that, then we can leave the bike and work on it. But about 3 hours is our time for the bike fit.
There's a chorus of voices in chat talking about the necessity of bringing snacks to your bike fit.
I think for a 3-hour fit, we've left snack territory and entered like sandwich territory.
Totally, it's just like a ride or like a run. Mm-hmm. Bringing something to drink and to eat. Pre-pandemic times, we had a stocked fridge and goodies and everything. We're still trying to figure out, there's some rules and things about, having food and different things. But yeah, as an athlete, sitting 3 hours and a lot of that time is pedaling. And we've had athletes, get fatigued and almost like bonk, especially if it's a warmer day, or they come in after a workout sometimes prior to the bike fit, and they're already, fatigued. So yeah, we usually say it's they get a free bike workout with each bike fit. So yeah, having snacks and drinks is important.
I've had athletes upload their Garmin files from bike fits before. It's always hilarious.
Yeah.
We also have a recommendation from Fiona Moriarty 16 that athletes just travel with you so that you can set their bikes up for them. Is that a service that you provide? Is that?
Yeah, it's mobile mechanic and bike fitter. There, I don't know who this mystery person is.
Never heard of her. She sounds great.
But yeah, that's ideal. I offer the services pretty hefty fee. I have to, cook all my meals for me.
Right. Regular dinners. Right.
Chef level baker and cook. But yeah, you can have me come to the races and set up your bike. That's the ideal scenario when you unpack that bike.
It's an excellent. Oh, she just fell off the treadmill. Sorry, Fiona.
You're gonna have to go ahead and ban that person.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
really
troublemaker. Troublemaker.
It's an evil bot. Right.
I think that that brings us to the end of our time. Josh, this has been informative and just real fun. So thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us about coaching and bike fitting and the penalty box and why you're no longer allowed in Zambonis. I feel like we've gotten to know so much more about Josh Sutton tonight.
No, I'm glad that your one of the first few visits you've ever had to detention was so pleasant.
Right. No, it makes it feel like not a bad thing. Right?
Yeah, you should have given it more of a chance in high school.
You're all the cool kids are in detention.
Oh,
so.
for sure. For sure.
Well, Molly and I spent like a lot of our high schools in detention.
And if there's a descriptor for me and Chris, it's definitely cool kids.
The cool kids.
No. Well, now I'm probably one of the cool kids.
That's right. Welcome. We do a lot of science here. Yeah, but thank you again. This has been awesome. And for those of you out there, thank you for a super exciting and energetic chat and an awesome hype train, 3rd level hype train. My goodness, this never happens. You guys love Josh. It's great. Make sure you join us back here again, same place, different time, 6:30 a.m., not in the evening, 6:30 a.m. for Yoga with Amy VT tomorrow morning. It's going to be great. It's a great way to spend this time when we're stuck indoors here in the Pacific Northwest. Make sure you take care of your body. Yeah, Josh, thank you again. This has been super fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Everybody go and as soon as you're able next to get to Portland, go visit Josh at Output Speedlab. And Josh is taking coaching clients as well. So if you are interested in getting coached for the remainder of 2020 and 2021, please reach on out to us. But thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And here's to a happier and faster tomorrow.
Bye, guys.